Thank you for joining us at Modern Chi. I am Katy Mason. So great to be in this space with everyone. And I am here with my friend Staci Taustine. I invited her back again because a couple months back I did an interview with her and she helped me answer so many questions about personal branding. And the talk was on because authenticity shouldn't be a buzzword, telling and owning your not so linear story with confidence. So I want to welcome Staci to come back and check in with us to see what her thoughts are now on this topic. So I want to pass the mic to Staci and let her introduce herself. Welcome, Staci.
Thank you, Katy. It's so great to be here with you and to have this invitation to join you with Modern Chi. I loved our collaboration last time, and so I'm thrilled to talk with you more on this topic. It feels ever critical in this moment where, folks are starting to think about what this next phase of life is going to look like. Many folks are navigating transitions back to the office. Some folks are staying remote, and all of us are thinking about kind of how we want to be portraying ourselves to not only, potentially land new roles, but also be visible and present in a way that kind of forecasts upward growth for ourselves. Something that was really hard for a lot of us who were not visible like we might have been when we were in the office over the last year and a half. And so this feels like a great topic for right now. A little bit about me. I am the founder of Stubborn Heart Consulting. It is a coaching and training business where I work with folks across the public and private sectors who are motivated to live their best life at work and at home. I think there are a lot of folks out there who are realizing that we don't want another day to go by where we are turning off parts of ourselves to, survive a toxic work culture or stand for things that, we don't believe in. And at the same time, we want to show up for our families and ourselves. And so I'll speak for myself when I say that these are things that I was thinking a lot about, and kind of took the deep dive into entrepreneurship full time this past January after kind of side hustling for 3 years. I'm loving the work and the experience so far, and I'm happy to talk about any and all of these topics as we kind of explore together what it looks like to kind of navigate a not so linear path, which in my case is something that is very close to my heart.
Wonderful. Of course, like we want to cover how do you summarize your own story and weave it all together so that it all makes sense and that it is your brand voice that you're putting forward, and then continue to build confidence and maintain confidence in what your work stands for and what you have to offer. So jumping into the first question, it's like for someone, how can they explain a layoff or gap in their work history?
Absolutely. So this is something that I get all the time from clients who are worried that, it's been a long year. Some folks have been out of work this year in particular, and then others have gaps in their work history from, years past where either they were raising family members or caring for family members, traveling abroad, recovering from a health condition, right? There are so many different reasons why we may have a gap. And the first thing that I, sort of coach myself around and continue to raise, which is that gap is time that stood for a purpose in our lives, whether it was one that was painful or one that was joyful or one that made us who we are in this very moment. The first piece for me is about not calling it a gap, right? Kind of removing that language that we've been conditioned to embrace of like, where's the gap in your resume come from? But reframe that to what purpose in my life did it serve? and how has that contributed to my overall story, right? Because whatever your answer to that question is the response that we're going to want to give when a potential employer asks, what were you doing during X period of time? And our response will come from a place of genuine acceptance and appreciation for the purpose that it held for us, as opposed to what a lot of us do, which is kind of rush to kind of cover it up or hide it away or disguise it as something that it wasn't. And what that does is kind of create that internal tension within ourselves that folks read on us, right? They see us agonizing over it. And that's what comes through in an interview or when we're trying to impress someone. And so the self-work on my end has always been to do the storytelling with myself, to understand what it meant to me, and then take that and use it to build the way that I'm talking about it going forward. And easier said than done. My biggest gap, if you will, was when I struggled with my health in 2016. Being out of work was something that really hurt emotionally, right? I didn't know who I was without that identity as a director of a program or a coach or a trainer. And so when I would go to talk about it, I'd be like, well, that was the time when I got sick, right? But what I learned as I've kind of processed that experience is that was when I healed, right? That was the time where I took to heal my body and nurture my mind to step into what was meant for me next. And so learning to see that as what it was for me and talk about it in that way, transition not only the way I experienced it, but then the way that I was able to combine that with my narrative going forward.
I see that. I feel like I'm hearing when there are mistakes or what feels like mistakes or failure, they are, we should take them and look at them, examine them, and see what lessons that we are learning from them. And perhaps it it's letting us grow into more of who we are. Uh, so I love that. And then I want to get into, I feel like a lot of times maybe failure and something bad happened, like shame and insecurity happened. And and then, so how can we go about reclaiming them and integrating them into, weaving them into the part of the story so it makes sense? What is the process like, and how can we take those insecurities and shames and use them as a source of power? Yeah.
I love that language, Katy, like using sources of shame as a source of power. I'm going to have to write that down after, because that is really a process, right? So this idea that we could wake up one morning and transition to talking about something that has brought us deep shame into something that we're advertising, right, is a little bit more than what I would promote, right? I think a lot of us try to rush that process, myself included. It's like, all right, time to get up, get over this, keep it moving. I'm not the type to wallow, right? And then that pressure is an added layer of frustration that I see a lot of folks going through when they go through one of these major career events, specifically getting laid off or being fired, right? These are two major sources of shame or hurt that takes a while for us to heal around, right? I think a lot of folks can understand, oh, you have a broken heart from a breakup, but what about a broken heart from something like job loss, right? That is truly something we see folks internalizing deeply. It's not something that you can roll over and wake up on the happy side of the bed from. I think what you're describing is confronting that feeling of shame, understanding what it's connected to, right? Is it identity? Is it feeling robbed of your voice? Is it feeling that your story has been taken, or that you're not able to tell the story in the way that feels authentic to you, right? Like, what actually is it that is the source of the shame, right? Is it ego? I think there's a lot of us who pride ourselves in having a clean track record, right? I've never been let go, or that doesn't happen to me, right? But what is that we're not confronting? Is it just a need to accept that perfection isn't something that we're striving for anymore, but actually courage and strength or fortitude can replace that desire for perfection, right? So the first piece would be getting specific, right? To confront what exactly is the source of that shame. How does it play out over the course of our longer narrative, right? Where have we seen this feeling before, to try to get a sense for how to confront it now. And then also open up ourselves to the possibility that this might be our very first time, right? For some of us, the first time we're confronting a certain kind of shame, it will feel like climbing a mountain. And so giving ourselves the space to say, I'll get there when I get there. And in the meantime, here are the steps I'm going to take, right? Because we don't all have time to heal for forever, right? Sometimes you got to get back out there before you're ready, or before the shame has gone away, or before you have really had time to heal. And so what are the steps that you can do simultaneously in a way that fills up your cup? So I always say, think about what brings you pride or joy back, right? So in conjunction with feeling that shame or suffering, what simultaneously brings you joy and satisfaction? Because if we can balance that just a little bit, then we can propel ourselves using that momentum, right? So whatever it is that reminds you of who you are, whatever it is that brings you that source of joy, I always say, like, get that on the calendar, whatever it takes, if that means, I know that I feel the most myself when I'm in community with friends, then that's the first thing that goes on the calendar, right? And building myself up to, all right, I'm seeing my friends, but now I want to be honest about how hard this has been on me. Like, that's a whole nother layer, right? Confronting that shame in a more public way, where now I'm not just talking to myself about it. Now I'm trusting my closest friends with that secret of mine, that this is harder on me than I thought it was. And I think through those sort of progressively more challenging experiences, the healing starts to occur, and we start to decide what it is, as you said, we've learned from it, and then what it is that has done for who we are now, right? So it might mean that my personal professional brand now includes the term resilient, right? Because I've been through something really hard that I've now bounced back from. And before that, I didn't have that in my repertoire, right? So what is the thing that we can now say we are as a result of that challenge and having processed through those really difficult moments?
Mhm. Gosh, I always love hearing you talk, and I am definitely gonna have to like watch this part back just so I can gather and let the notes like really sink in. Um, I really believe that it's so important to try to find passion. So, with the job that you may be searching for, is there a way maybe to align your passion with the work that you're aiming towards, so that they're kind of in parallel, like wanting to pursue the career and then aligning that with part of the passion that you have. um, but or otherwise it could be that because your drive for the passion that you want to pursue in your life is so great that the job is more like something that would give you a stepping stone to support your passion further. Um, and and I know there isn't really a question in there, but maybe this will help. The question in regards to this person who has two unrelated master's degree, and they just feel like can't quite really pull them both together to explain it in a cohesive way. I mean, yeah, what are some ideas and tips for maybe bringing those both of them into the picture, because this person had gone through so much and did all of the hard work to receive those degrees, those master degrees. So how can they pull it together?
100%. And this may be one of the most common challenges that folks face today, having, pursued something when they were young and then changed their mind or changed course as they learn more about who they were and what they wanted. And so I love kind of your preface there around aligning passion and purpose to your work and articulating exactly how that passion or purpose lives at the intersection of the experiences that you had along the way. So this kind of speaks to the nonlinear path, right? A lot of folks' instinct is to just comb over or comb out the things that seem like outliers. Whereas what we know is that those outlier pieces are where the most authentic parts of our story live. And so the recommendation that I would share to anyone sort of mapping this for themselves is kind of write all the things down, as messy as it looks, in one place, and sort of boil it down to a thematic sort of adjective or traits or behavior or premise that aligns to all of them, right? Seemingly being a teacher, a coach, a advisor, and an entrepreneur are separate, right? Like they are all different things. You might list them very differently on LinkedIn. And yet at the core of that, for me, is innovation, right? This desire to create content, new experiences, new ideas, and bring it to market to serve people, right? And so if I were to align these seemingly unattached sort of pathways through anything, I might funnel that through innovation, right? Because that's the thread that is the most aligned to my personal professional brand. And so to this person that kind of posed the question, I would ask, what was true about you in each one of those pursuits that has not changed, right? What was the thing that was present no matter what? And then let's find the right language to connect them, because you don't want to leave those things out, right? You do want to bring them along with us, and how you highlight them may be different for the different types of roles that you may be going out for or the experiences that you're pursuing, but finding the way to do them justice for yourself is both good for us and it's good for future employers to understand us more holistically.
I am imagining or seeing a drawing of a Venn diagram of those different areas, and then seeing where they intersect in the middle, and then going from there. And of
100%.
course, definitely talking to the people who are around you to ask them to give you, maybe tell you a bit about like what they see in you as your strength, and really like thinking out loud exercise with, oh, I did this and that role, and then within that I feel like, yeah, these were the places where there was common ground, commonality.
Absolutely. And I love the recommendation you make about soliciting external perspectives, because you might sit there and stare at that Venn diagram for days and be like, but there's nothing that overlaps here. And your point about getting that external perspective could fill the gap for us, because sometimes we just are missing it. And so absolutely, I love that as like a call to action, is make it a shared exercise or get some other input that will definitely help kind of fill the diagram in for us.
Yeah. And so I want to ask about, with your resume or your LinkedIn, maybe what you currently do isn't really aligned to the role that you're pursuing. Um, what do you suggest, and how people can also make those to become a little bit more aligned?
Yes. So this is where the About Me section becomes our best friend. It's actually, the first part of the LinkedIn profile that someone's going to see even before they get to our experience. And so it is so critical that we take the time to massage that section into a forward-looking explanation of who we are right now and who we are growing into. I think resumes inherently look backwards when we want folks to understand us looking forward. And so that about me section gives us the chance to talk about not only what we have done holistically, but how this relates to the pieces of the types of roles you're excited about. And you might be able to tie together specific actions that you took in prior roles and use those to align to the actions required in a future role, right? So even if you are currently in media and you plan to go into social impact, right? There may have been things that you did in media, like sourcing content and kind of creating headlines that could be used to tell a social impact story at scale to move a initiative forward, right? So pulling the actions or behaviors from what you did that is applicable and then highlighting those center to your about me section will help you to shape the perception of your profile and help readers to see you the way you see yourself. The only caveat is that you actually have to believe that you're about to be who you say you are. The problem most of us face is that we're like so busy being an imposter or saying like, oh, I'm not there yet. I haven't achieved this yet. I'm not good enough yet. If we can suspend those things long enough to craft a really meaningful about me, then the work is done.
I love that you brought in the confidence piece, and a part of it is definitely talking to people, so the bad word networking, but maybe then, because when you do go and do that, you have to self-introduce yourself, self-introduction, and then that's when someone may be able to practice what they want to become.
Mhm.
Yeah. and
100%.
and the more you say it, the more it becomes real. Yeah.
True, true, true. And the funny thing is, I learned this in the entrepreneurship journey is that so many of us don't know what we're asking for, right? There are all these people preparing to fundraise to get backing for their business, and they land in front of someone inadvertently, and they're like, "Give me your pitch." And all of a sudden, it's not there. It's like, well, I don't know exactly what I am asking for, right? And the same thing is true for us as we job search, which is we know that we're on this journey, we're looking for something, but if you can land on what that something is, even if you're not there yet, when you get the chance to introduce yourself at this networking situations, you might be able to say things like, I'm really looking forward to doing X, or I'm so energized by the prospect of doing Y, that just putting that out into the world allows the right stakeholders to get invested in helping you do that, right? But a lot of us are afraid to put that out there, very much from that place of just struggling in our confidence and needing to work on that so that we can take those risks in conversation.
Yeah, it's great to practice and really get into words who you are and what you have done, because like we all have done so many things that are so valuable, and it's all lived experiences that we've had, and of course, like talking about it just allows us to practice saying it to someone, and also then when you do say it to someone, then you get feedback from this person whether or not it made sense the way that you phrased it, and then there's like nothing at stake really, because you're not really going into the interview scenario just yet, and so yeah, it's practice, practice, practice. Awesome. I want to move on to, so people, they're working for a company, but then how it's so important these days to develop your own personal brand as well. I mean, I understand it's a matter of finding some time to do it. And so please, can you give us some recommendation to develop your personal brand, even though you represent and work for a company?
Absolutely. And, it kind of brings us back to that Venn diagram image that you mentioned earlier. When we think about the part that lives in between, that's the sweet spot for our content, right? So if I were to think about, if I look at myself in my 9 to 5, what is true? And I look at myself between, 7 and 9 and 5 and 10, right? What also is true, then there is this sort of docket of choices of things that I might consider myself a thought leader or expert in. And it often overlaps with some of what's happening in our day job, right? So at times this is not true. If someone has been doing work that they want to get away from, they've actually learned that it was a total misstep, and they might kind of refrain from posting on the topics related to their day job for a while. But if you are kind of working at that intersection of like love, where there's already some things in that space that you do kind of enjoy, I always say start there. So if you're working in marketing and you really enjoy sort of stakeholder interviews, design thinking, because you use that to prepare audiences and write content, then I also happen to be a Girl Scout leader in my spare time, right? So what is true about being a Girl Scout leader and someone who engages in design thinking? The answer might be, preparing, Girl Scout meetings with content that is going to surface engagement and bring back happy Girl Scouts week over week, right? And so your content space becomes that place of who you are as a troop leader and who you are as a brand advisor leading focus groups and telling the stories of what makes you great at both of those things, right? So you're giving yourself this dynamic persona that allows you to embrace some of who you are outside of work, some of who you are inside of work, and then tell compelling content narratives about those topics. And that's a kind of goofy example, but it's a way to illustrate what is possible when you think about that intersection and really lean into it, as opposed to let them live separately, right? I think if you were to randomly post an article about Girl Scouts and then randomly post an article about focus groups, right? Like it would be very hard for someone to synthesize that. But if the common thread is engaging your stakeholders and making sure audience satisfaction occurs, and that's true about your Girl Scouts and it's true about the folks that you work with at your agency, then you've landed on a successful common brand topic that allows you to have the personal and the professional intertwined.
I am also hearing, well, thanks for working so hard for us. We're not paying you, but you are telling us the secret sauce in how to do it and how to make it all make sense. And I want to ask you then, what are the mistakes that people make when they're discussing their non-linear path?
So I think a lot of it is tone, right? So it starts with missteps in tone where either we haven't digested it for ourselves first and we just kind of go right to word vomiting onto the internet, right? Like events that are happening in real time, folks just start narrating and it's out there before they've had time to digest what has just happened to them or what it means to their journey. And so I always tell folks, pause button is our friend. Like take that time and space for ourselves before we're broadcasting to the world. We live in like 24-hour news cycle, social media land where almost everything is happening around us, but it's okay to slow it down, right? Slow it down so that you are reaping the benefits of reflection and then also reaping the benefits of being intentional. I think there's a big difference when someone is intentional. Their tone is much stronger, their content is much stronger, and the impact is much stronger. So, I mean, rushing is the mistake, I guess. And then the other mistakes I see are often related to feeling compelled to give away the punchline every time, right? Like sometimes folks are overly prescriptive with the answer for the crowd, right? As a reader or someone out there experiencing your content, I like to go on my own journey, right? Like the reader wants to make the connection of like, gosh, like there really is something there to being a Girl Scout troop leader and advertising executive, like how wild. And I can reflect on what that means to me, right? I think when people tell their brand story with too much of, and here's the point of the story, right? Folks don't get to go on that journey. And so I always encourage my clients and folks that I'm working with to leave a little room for romance in your content, right? Like let people piece it together and go on that journey of their own, because telling your story often helps other people process theirs. And so that's a big one, where there's a lot of room for opportunity. And, you know, there are a lot of influencers out there doing it differently. And I think if you follow their prescription, you know, the right number of bullet points with the lead intro, and, you know, it's helpful at times, but I also think it could take away from just how special what you have to share really is.
Absolutely. Now I know why we are friends, because you love to engage the audience and allow them to think for themselves and get curious to ask their own questions. You're not just there to lecture and give the presentation, hey, this is the step-by-step way of doing something. I mean, you give some of that, but you also then ask them the question that's necessary for each person individually to figure out their own plan. Yeah.
That means the world to me, Katy. It really does. That might be the best compliment I've ever received. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I want to get into, I have to ask, we're almost at the end of our time, but of course, you know, I want to ask you a diversity question, which is, how do you feel your take on diversity has shaped the work you have done in your community and the positions you've held?
Absolutely. I was actually having a really great conversation with a colleague this morning around, you know, the title of this workshop was all about buzzwords, right? And the way that the landscape talks about topics, and diversity, equity, and inclusion are kind of thrown around the news feed these days, somewhat haphazardly in my perspective, where there is acknowledgement that this is critical, that it is important, and yet there's a gap in most of our ability to show up for the conversations, for the work, for the next steps after the meeting that will shape the landscape of the kind of workplaces and communities that we all live in tomorrow. And so my approach to this work is grounded in inquiry and community-based approaches to collaborative decision-making. I think at the end of the day, when folks who are most impacted by a decision are part of the conversation in creating policy around how that decision gets made, we will better act on what needs to change, so that there are more inclusive processes long-term. And that comes from working with students and young people of color who conveyed to me in the earliest parts of my career that there are a lot of assumptions about what is needed. There are people with power and positions of power making decisions who do not share the identities and do not share the experiences of the folks that they're decision making on behalf of. And so everything about that work has, you know, been part of designing programs and coaching models that are based in inquiry, asking instead of telling, learning instead of speaking always, and building bridges, making connections amongst, you know, folks who have power and folks who should have more power in decision making in boardrooms and the like. So that's kind of the long and short of it. But I'm deeply passionate about what it takes to build inclusion in spaces, in schools, in workplaces, and in communities. That's really why I get up to do the work I do every day.
Hmm. Oh, so good. I overall, in even the last couple of questions and answers that you shared with us, I feel there is a deep sense of really reaching out to the audience and seeing who is on the other end receiving the information, and then how you are able to co-create and work together to find solutions. So I really appreciate that, the ideals there, and also the values that you continue to bring to your work. I want to check in and see what you have coming up next for Stubborn Heart, and what can the audience find out more about in terms of your next workshop or course, next offering. Please let us know.
Absolutely. So I continue to coach one-on-one. I work with folks across industries, across experience levels, and really partner with my clients to build their professional and personal brands, to prepare themselves for their next step on their career journey, and to map the stakeholders and consider ways to elevate within the context of their place of employment. And so if any of those things are on folks' mind, I can be reached on LinkedIn or via my website to set up a 15-minute coffee. I love meeting folks who are kind of exploring these things and want thought partnership around it. And certainly my passion for bringing these concepts to folks at large is still the number one priority. So if there's anyone listening who wants to bring personal professional branding to your workplace, if you want to talk about remote collaboration or thoughtful collaborative decision making, all of those things are offerings that I have available, and happy to connect with folks about building a customized workshop wherever you are.
Wonderful. I am so grateful that you're able to join us today, Staci. All the information is down below in the show notes, and so that you can reach out and connect with Staci and connect with me. Be sure to subscribe to Modern Chi to go on this journey with me, building fun, informative life work integration talks for all of us. And of course, the conversation is never over. So see you at the next one.